Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for September 27th, 2021, around 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot to talk about today, including the potential for Hurricane Sam to be impacting Bermuda over the next 5 or 6 days. And you look at more tropical activity that could be brewing across the tropical Atlantic. So let's go and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this afternoon, we are still continuing to monitor Hurricane Sam. Sustained winds right around 120 miles per hour now. Some weakening has occurred due to an eyewall replacement cycle overnight. This is continuing to move off generally towards the north-northwest here and will be turning northeastward, northward, and then eventually northeastward later in the week. And this could come awfully close to the island of Bermuda, so interest there should be paying attention to local forecasts for your specific region. We are also watching two tropical waves out here, a non-designated area of low pressure here, and newly designated invest area 90L. Both of these have a high probability of going on to becoming our next named storms over the next several days. So again, looking here at Hurricane Sam, the forecast again has largely remained unchanged for the last several days, although we are no longer expecting any significant strengthening. We had what could have been a peak of a Category 5 storm yesterday. That has now since, again, really kind of waned. The storm has waned due to an eyewall replacement cycle. So the initial motion has shifted a little bit further westward because it's not as strong of a storm as it was, but this will continue moving generally towards the west-northwest here, and then eventually turning northward sometime later in the week. And again, this is the 5-day forecast right now from the National Hurricane Center, showing the center position of what would be Sam, still Major Hurricane Sam, well off the coast here of Bermuda, but it is entirely possible that we get a track a little bit closer to the island here, which we'll talk about in a moment. So looking at the overall satellite picture today, again, the storm's presentation on satellite has really degraded since yesterday. But we also noticed that, again, we've had these wrapping convective bursts that have been rotating in and around the center of circulation, the eye, which is right here. So this has now contributed to, again, a healthier looking storm than last night. And in fact, we had a very disheveled storm earlier in the morning and over in the overnight and into this morning. We had a very disheveled look. And today it's starting to look a little bit better with those centralized convective bursts once again. And we noticed that, again, there isn't a lot of dry air around, but there is some that is still trying to work in on the southern side here, but isn't really making it in towards the inner core structure. And we saw a little bit of shear last night, actually degrading some of the presentation, and that was also a cause for some of that dry air to work its way in, but that has mixed out today. The recon plane that was in there, or that is in there currently, did find a minimum pressure of right around 958 millibars, which would support a drop of a couple of millibars from the previous plane. The drops-on data supports about 958, 959 millibars. And the pressure has risen just about 14 or 15 millibars from yesterday during this time. But the overall pattern seems to suggest that the storm is now intensifying once again. But the flight level winds here support, flight level combined with a blend here of the SFMR surface winds support roughly about 95 to 100 knots. So this is still likely a low-end Category 3 hurricane at the moment, a high-end Cat 2 to low-end Category 3 at the moment, but is still generally continuing towards the west-northwest like such. Now, over the next several days, the steering flow here is going to be pretty straightforward, and again, mostly it's this trough of low pressure here coming off of the Canadian Maritimes and off the East Coast that is going to start pulling the storm generally more towards the north here in a more poleward direction. Now, there's already this weakness here, and there's also a secondary weakness in this area, but we can also tell here once the storm begins to approach this region, it will begin to feel this trough connection here and begin to lift it northward, and this is likely to gain some pretty significant latitude. And again, here on the GFS, this upper level trough here turns the storm well away from Bermuda, so this is certainly good news. We also have another storm, which we'll talk about here in a second, and this would likely be the central main development storm. But we'll look here on the European forecast. Again, the euro is a little bit more towards the left side of the track, but it is still very similar. And this upper level trough here carries Sam well out and away from Bermuda. So there is still some potential that Bermuda could see an impact here. It is certainly possible that that might indeed happen. But the overall confidence right now in today's forecast is for a storm to make its way up and then get turned by this trough and away. But again, when does this turn exactly occur? Because if this turn occurs a little bit later, this could go right over Bermuda or pass just a little bit to the west of Bermuda, or the best case scenario is what the operational GFS and Euro are showing, which is well to the east of Bermuda. So luckily, again, the threat for Bermuda is low at this time, but it is still there. And we may see a track here that gets a little bit close to Atlantic Canada, but again, most of the models today are suggesting that we won't really have a significant threat. But you can see here on the GFS, well, we have a storm that turns northward, and this again would be subtropical at this point. But it just goes to show that there could be some potential impacts with time to that particular area. Now, looking across the rest of the tropical Atlantic, we have two other systems that we're primarily watching. This non-designated area of low pressure, which will soon probably be Invest Area 91L, and a tropical wave designated now Invest 90L, and both of these systems have a very high probability of becoming a tropical storm during the next several days, and then a 60-60 shot here for a tropical wave, or really non-tropical low that could become a tropical depression or storm well to the east of Bermuda. So if we take a look here at Invest Area 90L, again, we can see that there is some fairly decent mid-level cyclonic vorticity at the moment. None of it making its way to the surface, but this is, again, mostly tangled up with the monsoon trough. Again, the monsoon trough with westerly winds here. You've got the tropical easterly jet with mainly easterly winds here. So this is creating that background cyclonic vorticity in this general vicinity like such. And you get that little curl on the northern end like that. And again, this is not really related to cyclonic vorticity generated by the convection, but it is more so just background cyclonic vorticity created by the opposing steering in the atmosphere. And again, this will be moving slowly during the next several days, but it will be moving generally towards the west or northwest for the next several days. Now, the GFS 200 millibar wind profile shows what will be a very unhealthy setup for the storm as we progress through the next several days. And one of the main things here is because we have Sam in this position right now as a strong storm, it is creating a lot of ridging downstream, and the upper level outflow here is also creating this massive tut like such. And so here's our storm right now in this environment. And again, it's trying to get itself organized really down in this area here. And you can see over the next several days that the GFS, again, does create a strengthening storm. In fact, does have what appears to be this wave becoming a pretty strong hurricane at low latitudes. The main problem with this is we can see that Sam, as it's now beginning to move northward and get entangled in its own trough, is going to be just creating this massive tut here, and it's just shearing everything off. There's no upper level anticyclone in this environment to work with, and there's also a pretty unhealthy setup here as you begin to enter the Caribbean. So it looks like that, again, we'll have a pretty unhealthy setup, and the GFS maintains this for quite some time. And in fact, again, the environment does become a little bit more favorable once you enter the Caribbean here, but if you can't really get any coherent storm to contain itself and really focus its energy here, and if this tut is too strong, again, it's just going to shear everything apart, and you probably won't have much coming through the Caribbean. Now we can see here that the upper level pattern does become way more favorable, at least for a time, in the tropical Atlantic. But again, this is mainly stuck in between two tuts here. So again, not really sure that there's going to be anything here to take advantage of during this time. And one of the most kind of important things here is, like we're seeing on the H-war forecast, we don't really have anything that's really coherent. Throughout this entire forecast period, we get maybe some semblance of a storm to form, but it's not really strong. Now, if we look here at the 500 millibar height anomalies and we zoom out here, and again, taking a wide look here, we notice that again, we have a general weakness in the steering flow. But if we take a look here at the GFS ensembles and the ensemble mean sea level pressure during this time, we can see that again, we do actually get maybe a little bit more hints here at the end of the forecast period for something to be forming down here in the Caribbean. But we notice that again, there's not really a coherent structure to anything approaching the Lesser Antilles within, 6, 7, 8 days. There could be a weak storm somewhere in this region, but it doesn't seem to be overly impressive during this time. The main steering flow, again, for any strong storm is just going to be generally out and away like this. I mean, you're going to be getting that type of flow. So any storm that is at least somewhat strong in the mid and upper levels is just mainly going to go right around here and follow into this weakness in the ridge here. There's this weakness right in through here, and that is going to be the primary steering influence for the next several days. But some of this energy may try to work its way through the Lesser Antilles and into the Caribbean, where we may have to watch beyond that point in time, but I'm not overly concerned about it at the moment. All right. So that being said, I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.